So this video is from Choy. It's talking about how the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game that's coming out later this year, or not later this year, because it's technically until 2022, next year, rather. Still made by the same guys who made Friday the 13th, Gun Media. They are making a Texas Chainsaw Massacre focus game. It's a 4v3, I think, which is kind of weird, because you have to play the family members of good old Bubba Soya versus the survivors. And apparently, Choy believes that there's a the biggest problem DBD has gets fixed by this new ASYM. So, yeah.
There are no shortage of new asymmetrical multiplayer horror games coming out. The subgenre has really started taking off. That said, most of these new games are sadly having very short lifespans once they're actually released, as they just can't find a permanent audience, due in large part to Dead by Daylight's incredible popularity. So
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this right away. I slightly disagree. Not that I think what he said is wrong, is because like DBD is like the juggernaut. It is kind of like the Disney of ASYMs, you know? It sees all, it controls all, it has all the licenses, right? I think the main issue with ASYMs is that they're legitimately not fun. I think that DBD, how many games of DBD do you play that you hate? And that's the best one. I think legitimately getting the formula of an ASYM correct is incredibly hard, and usually people who break away and make their own ASYMs prefer a side. And I think it shows when they make their game. I already made this whole video, so I'm not gonna go too in depth into it. But one of the things that made VHS kind of like, you know, taper off, was that the teen role in that game was super well thought out, fleshed out. And I will say with full confidence, way like 30 times more fun, way more fun than Survivor ever has been in DBD. But Monster was so incredibly underwhelming and non-complex that they couldn't retain a killer player base, or a monster player base, excuse me. They could not retain a monster player base because there just wasn't that same level of depth and care through the monster side. So you could only like do the same thing so often. Like even, especially when you were talking about like Wolf versus like Wart, it's like I have the I go attack them ability. I have the I track ability. I have the I figure out where people are ability. You know, like they're basically doing the same thing, right? How many times can you do that before you get bored? Right? How many times can you do that before you get bored? Even the first 3 killers of DBD, Trapper has traps, but he also has the normal kit. Wraith, stealth, Hillbilly, map mobility, and eventually an insta down, right? Like the first three characters of DBD were dramatically different. Like in terms of their powers, at least. The gameplay, you know, was a little bit more in line, but their powers were dramatically different. So if you got sick of one, you could go play the other one, and it was a different experience. And also, I feel like the role of Monster, just in general, was not very intriguing. So when people got bored of it, they couldn't retain it because they put so much effort into Teen. And if they brought that same energy to Monster, VHS would still be here. It's still here technically, but they only have like hundreds of players on at a time, and only hundreds. A lot of ASYMs are, oh good, interesting Survivor gameplay, and then, wow, boring killer gameplay. But that's what I'm saying. I feel like most ASYMs fail because they favor a side. Because they work too hard on not making the game fun, but kind of like almost wish-fulfilling things they hated about other games. You know, this is gonna get way too deep for the kind of video we're watching, but this is where my brain went. It's like trying to build. It's like when you rebound after a relationship. Follow me here. I promise this matters. You're trying to not heal from the bad things that happened from the last relationship. You're just trying to just like, you know, torpedo right into the next one and then trying to like set up house as if nothing ever happened, right? You're trying to just like, oh, well, I don't have to deal with the issues that happened in that relationship. I can just do everything better in this new one, right? You're not trying to actually like grow as a person and like reflect. You're just like, that won't happen this time, you know? And that ain't healthy. That ain't healthy. That is not how you do that. But it's like what these ASYMs do. It's like they're like, I don't like that about DBD, so we're gonna do things differently. And as it turns out, not having a good time with your ex is not enough to have a healthy relationship. Hating how you and your ex did things is not enough to have a healthy relationship with the new person. Same thing with ASYMs. Just because you hated the last thing does not mean it's enough to sustain the new thing.
So how is it that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is going to be any different? Well, to answer that, let's talk about DBD's biggest issue, which is that it's a 1v4, 1 killer versus 4 survivors. Now, inarguably, a lot of players will love that about Dead by Daylight, myself included.
I do, yeah.
I really enjoy playing killer and I don't mind the stress of it. But a lot of players do mind the stress and find it to be a completely awful experience. Because of that, they mostly choose to stick with playing Survivor. That way they can play with 3 other players on the same team and the stress gets divided amongst everyone.
Yep.
The killer role in turn can often feel very unfair because killer players have to rely on themselves 90% of the time. Every small mistake can mean the difference between victory and a life-altering 4-man escape. The big downside to all of this is that having such heavily different experiences between both the killer and survivors, 2 entirely different communities got formed. The divide between players not only makes every balanced decision in Dead by Daylight a complete pain in the ass for the developers, but it also corrupts what was initially a horror game and converts it into a highly competitive game that slowly pushes players away if they aren't able to keep up. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre game fixes this problem almost entirely because it's a 3v4, 3 killers versus 4 survivors. So the stress factor of playing a solo role is basically gone, and in its place, players can now choose which role they're more in the mood to experience at any given time. Since it's essentially a team game now, every player also has much more agency than they do in DBD. There doesn't need to be a boring meta objective to keep survivors busy while their teammate is getting chased.
I do want to say this though. I want to say this. I do want to say this. This could potentially be a problem because, and it could potentially could be or it could potentially not be. That is 7 people. That is a lot of people. I know it's only 2 more than DBD, but that is a lot more people. So you gotta consider that. Your turns might be longer, and you have to have literally a higher player base, like 2 more people for every match. So you gotta keep that in mind.
Survivor is just trying to escape the map by physically getting out of it, no generators required. Additionally, 3v4 also comes with a lot of potential for new problems, but anytime they've been pressured, the devs have responded with complete confidence that it's an amazing formula, and they have played—
With that 3 more people? No, because it's 7 total players versus 5 total players. Killer, 4 survivors, 2 more killers added in addition to that.
Tested thousands of hours of matches with it still feeling great after all that time, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Now going back to DBD, make no mistake, the Dead by Daylight community has literally murdered other asymmetrical games because of the killer versus survivor mentality. So when TCM releases, there will of course be players who walk around with Team Survivor or Team Killer t-shirts on and make Reddit thread after Reddit thread complaining about game balance not being in their favor. But the developers have gone on record explicitly saying that it's not really meant to be competitively balanced. It's a hide and seek game with chases. The gameplay is very cat and mouse. Stealth is a huge factor. If you're playing Survivor, there's a really good chance you're going to get slaughtered. Now to be fair, it's up to the developers to make it fun to die. Dying in video games for whatever reason is usually made out to be as annoying as possible. I'm not really sure.
That was, you know, fun fact. This is a random tiny fun fact. Did you know that's one of the main like motivations behind what made Heavy Rain, like Heavy Rain's gameplay style, is that apparently the devs hated that almost every game has dying be such a crappy, gross experience. So they wanted it to be. Because obviously it's different because it's an ASYM versus a narrative experience. They wanted you to see what it was like if a character did die partway through the story, and how that affects everything afterwards. They didn't want death to be the end of the plot, but see how it shapes it, which I thought was a really, really cool mentality to take. How you transfer that mentality to a ASYM game that doesn't have a narrative? Good question. Good question. There's plenty of ideas you could do with that, like having like, you know, their sacrifice mean something, or like something they can do in like the afterlife, but making the death enhance the game and add more to it rather than just having it be like essentially like a very like child in timeout kind of treatment, which it seems to be in most games. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I just wanted to give you that tidbit.
Why that's a thing that devs love doing, but usually your screen will turn into some awful color and you'll hear possibly the most annoying noise ever created.
Yeah.
But as long as the majority of players don't feel like they're somehow emotionally tied to a specific role, and everyone understands they are playing an asymmetrical horror game based on a horror movie franchise, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game will have a long lifespan and finally be the real true competitor that Dead by Daylight desperately needs. If Friday the 13th never got axed in the way it did, I'm confident that Dead by Daylight would be a much better game by today. A lack of competition does nobody any favors. TCM releases sometime next year, but based on early gameplay previews, the game is in a very stable state right now. It's completely playable, so I expect there to be some kind of beta much earlier. So what would you like to see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game do better than Dead by Daylight? Are there specific features, balance? Let me know, and as always, thanks for watching and have a good one.
I agree with him. I agree that, like, you know, I agree more with like what he said later in the video, that like dying feels bad. So how do you make that a more interesting experience? I think like I do like I do like what he's saying for the most part, of like, well, you know, killer is stressful by itself because it's all you, but I kind of like that. I'm agree with him that I'm kind of like that, and I'm cool with it just being me, right? I don't find it stressful. I found it stressful when I was learning, but I don't find it stressful once I actually like got used to it. Like, of course it's still stressful when you have like game bugs or like really strong survivors, coordinated survivors. Like, it still happens, right? But like for the most part, I'm just chill. I'm chill on killer. I vibe. I kind of like it. But I agree more with what he said in the latter half, where having dying be not such a like slap on the wrist, go sit in timeout kind of experience is how you make games like this fun. This game will be fun for a month just to mess around, but take seriously. No, I'll play it. This is the only like ASYM I'm like, so many ASYMs are coming out and I just don't care. This is the only one I'm even slightly interested in. So I do want to play it. And you will see that you will see Texas Chainsaw Massacre content on the channel. Depending on how good it is, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I'm actually, the fact that it's also made by the Friday the 13th guys is really promising to me, because they've shown that they can make a fun ASYM game. I did love playing Friday the 13th a lot. Will you try Evil Dead? Still be free soon? I have no interest in it, but if you guys want me to, I could. Yeah, if you want me to, I could, but I don't personally have any interest in it. Should I have Breakers? No. I barely even consider Breakers. Like, Breakers is an ASYM, but it's not really... it's kind of like outside the genre, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I like DBZ and I like ASYMs, but together, not really. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like these two interests in my life shouldn't meet, you know? To bring it back to the funny relationship talks, it's like you wouldn't bring your ex to meet your new girlfriend, you know? It's like, it's just awkward. Yeah. It's just a little awkward, you know? You wouldn't want them in the same room willingly. That's how I feel about DBZ Breakers. I'm like, I like DBZ. I like ASYMs. Why you gotta be in the same room? But yeah, yeah, I feel like the key there with this definitely making it dying not feel as annoying. Because once you can do that, dying doesn't feel frustrating. Dying is just like, oh, part of the experience. So, yeah, I think you had a good point there.